Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video than what I normally do. As you've probably gathered from the title, I'm going to be attempting to learn how to sew clothing. I understand sewing is a skill that takes a lot of time and practice to get good at, so I figured just making a simple gathered skirt would be a good first project. The tutorial I'm following today is the dirndl skirt from sewguide.com. The link to that will be in the description. If you've been on my channel before, you know I primarily do fuzzy sock plushies, and this is quite different from that, so I guess let's get started and see what happens. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is cut out my pieces. I've already taken my body measurements as well as done all the necessary calculations for seam allowance and hems and stuff like that, so I have all the fabric dimensions ready to go. The skirt body is basically a giant rectangle, but the waist side is substantially longer than the length of the skirt. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but I guess all the extra length goes into making the gathers. Now I'm cutting out the piece with my fabric shears. I still have trouble wrapping my head around the fact that the waist was like triple the length of the skirt. But as I mentioned earlier, all that extra room got turned into gathers. I've literally never sewn an article of clothing before in my life, so it's still kind of weird seeing pieces of fabric this large. Anyway, next, I measured and cut the waistband, using the measurements from the tutorial. So, now that I've cut out my pieces, the next step is to join the two short ends of the skirt piece. So 7 inches down with a basting stitch, which is basically a stitch that you can easily remove, and that's going to be where the zipper is. So that's kind of just like a placeholder. And once we go down our 7 inches, then we're just going to stitch down the rest. I should probably mention that I'm going to be doing this all by hand because all I have is a mini sewing machine that really can't do anything. So yeah, this is going to be fun. To be honest, it was. I quite enjoyed sitting there sewing and listening to music. I thought it was going to be really boring, but it wasn't, and I'd totally hand sew skirts for all eternity, as long as I have my Simon & Garfunkel music playing. I tried it, you cannot sew without Simon & Garfunkel. Once I finished stitching down the length of the skirt, I moved on to finishing the edge. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to finish the edge down here, where there are the basting stitches where we're going to put the zipper. I'm assuming not, so I'm just not going to do it. I was right, I wasn't, because if I did, then there would be no place to insert the zipper, and that would be bad. Let's take a minute to focus on what's going on here. I'm finishing this edge in a completely wacky way, which causes stitches to appear on the outside, which is like not what you want. And I had actually stitched down like 5 inches before I realized that I was doing it wrong. So yeah, that you could see that on the bottom of the skirt. Okay, so this is kind of funny. I just realized I pinned all of these, but I pinned through both layers of fabric, so the seam would be doing weird things like this. It's like it won't lay flat. So now I have to repin it all. This was before I'd realized that I was pinning it completely wrong, so I ended up having to pin it again, so a total of 3 times. This was when I was sewing it wrong, and then like 5 inches down, off camera I switched and began sewing it the right way. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage of me actually doing it right, but this isn't a tutorial anyway, this is just me messing up. Next, I pinned and sewed the zipper in place where the basting stitches were, according to how the tutorial told me to do it. Okay, so I flipped the skirt piece inside out. It is very wrinkly. Here's the zipper, and the next step is just to do a zigzag stitch along the top to make the gathers with some fishing line. I have to say, working with fishing line is kind of annoying. It keeps on getting tangled and it's really rigid and just very stiff. By the way, the footage you see here has me sewing on the wrong side of the fabric. The way the zigzag stitch works is it makes a set of really pretty gathers on one side and a set of okay ones on the other. I was sewing so that the okay ones would be facing outwards, but I fixed it off camera. After I evened out all the gathers on the skirt, I pinned them in place so that they wouldn't move when I stitched them. So I am finished stitching all the gathers into place. I tried on the skirt briefly and I look like Maria from The Sound of Music, which is great. That's actually really cool. And next I'm going to be working on the waistband, which I have here. The pattern says to put interfacing on the waistband, and I have interfacing, but I don't think I'm going to do it because you're not supposed to put interfacing on the seam allowance, and I'm not sure where the seam allowance is going to be because you have to like fold it several times and do stuff with it, and I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out yet. So I think I'm just going to leave it like it is and let's see what happens. In case you were wondering, nothing happened. I just stitched on the waistband and then went over it again because I felt like it wasn't very secure. And then I folded it over the raw edges and whip stitched it onto the other side. Okay, so I finished the waistband. I didn't do it the exact way that the tutorial suggested because I wasn't exactly sure how to do it. So I kind of just sewed it on, folded it over, and sewed it on. Just making sure all the loose ends were tucked inside. And here's the zipper. And now I'm going to move on to the hem. So I'm kind of nervous about the hem because it's going to be seen very visibly on the outside of the skirt, so I think I'm going to use my sewing machine. It's a mini sewing machine and it can only do one stitch and it only goes at one speed very, very, very fast. So I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work. The sewing machine itself worked fine. The only thing is, I was supposed to fold over the hem twice so that there was no raw edge exposed, but I didn't do that and I also didn't leave myself enough room to finish it properly, so I kind of just did something to it and hoped it wouldn't fray too bad. Okay, so I'm technically finished with the skirt. Here it is. The hem is actually a lot neater than I thought it would be. The line is mostly straight. I also finished off this edge in here so that it wouldn't fray. I just did a running stitch. I figured it wouldn't get much wear. And I also marked out places for pockets because pockets are great. The line is about 4.5 to 5 inches wide. And pockets aren't part of the original pattern, but I watched Bernadette Banner's video on it and I think I can add them in, so I'm going to go trace my hand and make a pocket pattern. Okay, so I'm just making this pattern on a piece of scrap paper that I apparently did some math on. So the opening of my pocket is going to be 5 inches wide. I should have gotten an actual ruler for this. And I want my hand to fit comfortably inside it, so I'm just going to trace my hand. No, I'm doing this wrong. Wait. I watched the video again and came out with a revised shape, which I cut out and traced onto some scrap fabric to sew onto the skirt. The way I pinned the pockets to the skirt is kind of hard to explain, so I'll link Bernadette Banner's video in the description and you could check it out if you want to make your own pockets. It's not perfect, like how the hem has a raw edge inside and you could see little stitches on the seam, but I'm still really happy with it and it's pretty good for my first project. Over the past couple of days, I've discovered that I really like sewing, and this video style was a lot of fun to do. You can certainly expect to see more sewing around my channel now, as well as fuzzy sock plushies, crochet tutorials, and whatever else I feel like doing, so be sure to subscribe. With that, I guess I'll see you guys next time.